Okay, update on general equities here. It's April 23rd. It's Friday night. So we have a full weekly candle. Rough week for the markets. Really a rough month. And so we can start on the weekly chart. We're on SPX. And the other thing I'll mention here is that the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 have diverged a little bit. I mean, they're both heading down. Don't get me wrong. They're both heading in the same direction, but it's to different degrees. So the S&P 500 topped out on week 5. That was the week of March 28th, so the last week of March, and we've been falling ever since, right? So ever since we went below 4507, we made a swing high on the weekly level, and we've been falling ever since. I tweeted that out around March 6th, or excuse me, April 6th is when we had confirmation, so we had broken this low. And this week, I mean, look at this candle. We had a bullish outside week at one point, right? This was a big, bright green candle. And then we just failed all the way to the downside here. It seems incredibly unlikely that we don't at least make a low down here, the 4153 level, and probably make a fresh new low altogether. More importantly, this is only week 8 of our weekly cycle. And going back, and I tweeted this, you go back to like 2016, we don't have a weekly cycle that's any shorter than 18 weeks. So we could fall for another 10 weeks from here. But the details are important. The details are incredibly important. So if you zoom into the daily chart, we are on day 40 of the daily cycle. And so we are deep in the daily cycle. And so we would expect to get a bounce at some point. And it's not that the numbers are magical. It really is just that we've been falling for a long time, right? As markets are going down, they make lower lows and lower highs. Those lower highs have to happen at some point, right? Like these two really sharp down days, at some point we're going to get a bounce here, and that'll probably be our DCL, our daily cycle low. And what we'll want to watch for is an early daily cycle high, right? And so, look at this one. Like if we zoom in here, this daily cycle high happened on day 7. We'd look for something like that, day somewhere between day like 7 and like 10, maybe even 11. And so we're probably going to get a bounce here. That's going to be our chance to short. We really wouldn't expect it to get back to 4507, 4507. I'd be surprised if we get down there. I mean, we're probably going to make new lows. You imagine we close down like around here. That's where we make our DCL, and maybe we get back up to, like this level here. So like 4423, and that's where we roll over again. Um, and if we switch over to the QQQ, you can see it's different picture. So it's actually day 28, so not as deep in the daily cycle. Again, the QQQ looks like it's destined for 318 at the very least. And if you look at the weekly chart, this is where it's very different. For the Qs, we're only on week 5, and our high was actually week 2. So we're still earlier in the cycle for the Qs, which means we probably have longer to fall. And you can easily see us kind of visiting, a level like this, or excuse me, sorry, I mean like something like that, right? So like in the 270 area, very, very easily. And if you look at the monthly chart, it's really not painting a pretty picture. Where we had our high back in November, same as crypto, not coincidentally, they've really sort of like that correlation has become very heavy. And now we're beginning a pretty, orderly descent on the monthly level. And so we're setting up for a pretty difficult, next several months, possibly even the full year. And if we think about where this cycle might end, right? So like if we are on week 5 and let's say we have a 20-week cycle, that would give us an end on like around August, right? So like the 1st of August. S&P around the same timing band, a little bit sooner, like more like mid-July. But we're talking about going lower into the summer. But again, just like the S&P, we're going to get a bounce here soon at some point, and you're going to watch for that. Like this last bounce. So zooming into Qs, similar to the S&P, we had one daily cycle where the bounce died on day 7. Then the next daily cycle, the bounce died on day 11. So you can imagine you get a high somewhere between day 7 and 11, maybe even earlier, right? Like the bounces are getting weaker and weaker. But that would be your chance to short if you're really aggressive. If you somehow got caught long, that's also your chance to get out before, we take the next leg down. And finally, IWM. Uh, so IWM also day 40, similar to SPY, so deep in its daily cycle. And for IWM, we had our high on week 5 as well, and it's also week 8. So IWM is basically the same count as the S&P 500. The only big difference though is that with IWM, the last weekly cycle was 31 weeks, whereas for the S&P 500, the last weekly cycle was only 20. So it was relatively short. And so that's why it seems unlikely we're going to have a really short weekly cycle here, since the previous one was so short. Which is why, again, it means we have potentially longer to fall, more time to fall, which means we can go, even deeper. And if you look at the monthly chart on the S&P, not much better than the Nasdaq. We did top out in January versus November, so again, that's part of the reason why they've diverged so much, right? Like the Nasdaq has been falling for almost a full 2 months more than the S&P 500, but definitely looks like we're gonna make some new lows. I mean, just looking at the structure of this chart, right? Like you could see us definitely getting down into like the 3600 area very easily. So it's gonna be tough sledding, and again, I think we're gonna get a bounce soon. That bounce is going to be a chance to either short if you're really aggressive, or just get out if you already have a long position. But I'm just be ready for a bit of a tough slog, and I think crypto is going to get pulled down as well, just because of that correlation.